All right. Well, thank you so much for attending the inaugural webinar for the transitions. We are really excited to get this started. There's been a lot of work by a lot of people to get us to this point. My name is Mark Pew. I'm Senior Vice President of Product Development and Marketing for Preferred Medical. And me and my co-founders are very excited to welcome you today and hopefully to all the activities that we're going to have for the balance of 2021. When you registered, you gave us some profile look into who you are. And I found it interesting that 11% of you said that you were developing in your career trajectory, which is 0 to 10 years experience. 23% of you said that you're mid-career, which is 11 to 20 years of experience. And then 66% of you said that you were established or 21 plus years of experience. So we've got a pretty good mix of people in here, which is really the hope, is that we'll have stakeholders of all different ages, generations, roles, and positions as a part of this. So you might be asking yourself, what is the transitions? Well, we've established the mission statement, but I want to start with kind of the beginning. This began really this time last year when we put together a panel in preparation for the National Work Comp and Disability Conference for 2020. Unfortunately, we were selected as one of the October 21st live sessions. But during the preparation process, we kind of came to the conclusion that this was more than, or should be more than just a one-time event. And maybe this would be something that has more aspects to it and a longer life than just that 60-minute time period. So we decided that it deserved more than just that one-time event. And so we created the transitions. So our mission statement is the transitions is a movement to help the workers' compensation industry collectively and individually think strategically about how to handle the influx and outflux of talent over the coming decade. Now, you might be wondering about influx and outflux. Outflux you don't generally hear used very often, but I think the definition is really good. Influx definition is an arrival or entry of large numbers of people or things. An outflux is a substantial movement to leave or an exodus. And that pretty much talks about who workers' compensation is, and in reality, all over the world in all sorts of different industries and workplaces, what we're doing with that. So, but we've also got a goal, which is to encourage the creation of a transition plan. So our whole intention for this is for everyone to be able to create a plan for them individually, for their department, for their company, for everybody about how to handle the silver tsunami, which is the brain drain that Barry's going to talk about, as well as the incoming generations that's going on. So we've got a variety of different ways that hopefully you'll be willing to stay engaged with us. You can follow us on our LinkedIn page. So we have been busy. My computer's going crazy there. We have been busy over the past couple months. You can follow us on our LinkedIn page. You can search for The Space Transitions. You can join our LinkedIn group, which is The Space Transitions Space Forum. You can subscribe to our First to Know database. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And by the way, we are recording this and we will upload the recording to our YouTube channel probably early part of next week. Hopefully you'll find value in the webinars and you'll attend each webinar. And then you're going to use, hopefully, the handouts to create a plan. And I wanted to show you, if I can bring this up, the handout. If you look over in your GoToWebinar tab, you'll see a handouts tab. And you can see that we've given you two things. We've given you a PDF copy of the PowerPoint, and we've given you an actual document version of a handout. And we have committed to giving you a handout for each webinar, which includes the objectives, includes reference materials, things that you can look at, read, watch, etc. The different, what we're calling panelist points, which are two specific points that each panelist has thought through ahead of advance, and giving you the opportunity to write in your own. And then we're also giving you the opportunity to create a plan to-dos. You want to come up with stuff that you need to do within the next week, within the next month, or within the next 6 months based on what you've heard, and then a place for notes. So we hope that you will download those handouts and use them as a part of this webinar, and certainly the other webinars to come. So with that, I'd like to introduce all the different co-founders, and we will start with Barry. The best dressed man on the panel.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, I just wanted to say before I do my intro how important I think this work that we are doing is. I know I got a little blowback from my article written months ago relative to whether or not this is in fact an existential threat or not. Some people, I think, thought that was a little overstated, maybe a little overblown. Trust me, it's not. And I don't want to be dead right. So that's kind of why we're doing this. My background comes from predominantly claims. I've run a claim consulting practice for a large broker, and I've run numerous claim organizations. And for the last 13 years, I've been running my own consulting practice. It's a really interesting prospect when we talk about, because we've never faced this. We've never faced a life-changing pandemic, and now we're literally facing the prospect that we will have people leaving the industry and nobody wants to go back in. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Barry. Drew, you're up next, or as we call him, Magnum, with that great mustache.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. That'll be tough to live up to, but so my name is Drew Cortez. I'm a senior manager at United Airlines. I've got responsibility for workers' compensation, claims analytics, data security, and financial controls. I know that's a little bit of a mouthful. I've been at United for 3 years, and United was my introduction into workers' compensation as well. Prior to that, came from outside the industry, had kind of no clue what I was getting into, so hopefully can give a little bit of a unique perspective as a relative newcomer and unknown, I think, as we put it in the last webinar, and just unique perspective, I think, as someone that's a little bit on the younger end of the spectrum for the panel as well. So thanks for having me, everyone. Excited to be part of the group.
Thanks, Drew. Melissa?
Yes, so I'm Melissa. I'm our Director of Marketing at Ametros, overseeing all of our marketing efforts. Similar to Drew, I fall on the younger side of our workforce. I am a millennial, and I've actually only been in our industry for 5 years. I came to Ametros right out of college, actually, and I previously had interned in higher education and advertising. And at Ametros, I was given the opportunities to grow and support and training from folks like Marcus. And they weren't afraid to let me try things and fail. And I think that's one of the reasons why I joined the transitions, because I want to be part of attracting more folks from my generation and younger generations into this industry. And personally, I didn't think about work comp as a job field, when I was looking. So I didn't know about all of the opportunity within this industry. So that's something that I want to help spread the word on.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. Marcus?
Hey there. Well, I didn't know you failed at anything. What was that? No, I'm joking. Marcus Torford here. I'm the chairman at Ametros. Again, similar to I guess what Drew and Melissa led with. Also didn't start in this industry. So I've been at Ametros for around a little over 7 years right now. And prior to that, I worked in finance. So I worked at some investment banks and private equity field. And so as well, excited to be here, excited to share with you all too what we're working on. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Marcus. Rachel?
So hi, I'm Rachel Fikes, and I'm with Rising Medical Solutions, and I am the Chief Experience Officer, and I also run our annual workers' compensation benchmarking study. And the study has been researching the industry's response to the impending talent crisis since 2013. And it's no longer the looming crisis that we've been writing about. It is here. It's knocking at our front door. And I'm just excited to be part of the transitions to, really take our study findings a step further in helping our industry address its greatest current threat. But, I've also had to check myself, because it is our greatest opportunity right now. It's a transformational opportunity. And so, you know, in whatever small way that I can, I'd love to be part of helping our industry transform, you know, with this next generation of talent. And I just hope that everyone here wants to be part of that as well. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rachel. And last but not least, the official mascot of workers' compensation, Claire Musselman.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm part of the transitions first and foremost because this is like my passion. This industry has become my family, and it is something that I really want to see us, like Rachel just said, as we really just transition everything into what comes next and how do we make the experience better for people that are within the space and for people that have to come visit our space due to injury and whatnot. My name is Claire Musselman. I do run the first ever workers recovery unit for Continental Western, one of the W.R. Berkley companies, and it has been one of the most amazing things that I've seen come to fruition, where when we start changing the script and we start changing the narrative of what our jobs actually are within this space and how we communicate that to drive meaning and purpose, that's where I see a lot of this game changing happening within the industry. Aside from this awesome place, I love Workers Recovery Unit. You guys are my family too, and I love you guys to death. So those of you guys watching, thanks for being here today as well. But I also did my doctoral research on the insurance industry and the generational differences with that. So I have spent the past 4.5 years writing about the insurance industry and the generations with it. So Rachel and I like to, you know, collaborate and talk about all the data that exists right now. And it will be really fun to see what we are able to do to help make this industry even better, and with the new ideas and the fresh ideas and people coming from different avenues and different landscapes to make this the best industry that it could possibly be. So thank you to everyone being here today, and thank you, Mark, for spearheading all of this. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Claire. And you can see from the panel in front of you and their backgrounds and their perspectives that the founders of the transitions really reaches across all generations, all different roles and responsibilities, perspectives, having been in work comp for a long time, just recently joined work comp. And I think that diversity of perspective and opinion and backgrounds, it definitely has helped us kind of craft what we want to do going forward. So I'm really, really thankful for all the work that everybody on this panel has done. And there's a variety of other folks that have helped us a lot as well. Special shout out to Nancy Hamlet, who is our marketing partner. She's done a wonderful job of making sure that we look polished from a content standpoint, and has set up a lot of great things for us. And it's funny, as we were rolling out our press release on Monday, she was kind of reintroducing herself to a lot of the work comp media in regards to her marketing efforts, which is now independent. So I want to give a special shout out to Nancy as well, who's a part of our team. So with that, we want to give you kind of an idea as to what is ahead. And so what we have all decided is to take kind of a segment of something that's related to the transition and the transition of the silver tsunami, the brain drain, the experienced folks that are leaving, and potentially leaving with a lot of knowledge and expertise and experience. And how do you codify that? How do you institutionalize that? How do you document that? But also the influx of a new generation that thinks about things differently and don't necessarily, they think outside the box, or they may not even think there is a box in regards to how they manage that. And so what we have done is we've all kind of gravitated towards individual subjects. And these are going to be the subjects of individual webinars going forward. I intimated that this is a 2021 project. We actually have 12 webinars that are going to be scheduled between now and August. We've got this one today, then we've got one on Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 26th, with Rachel, and a great panel in regards to the data that she has accrued and looked at Rising Medical. And every 3 weeks, we're going to do a different webinar until ultimately in August, we're going to have the Create a Plan. But again, the whole goal is that you're creating a plan as you're going through. So this is not meant to be an academic exercise. This is not meant to be a passive listening audience that's listening to didactic lectures. We want you to be engaged. We want you to invite questions in chat, use the chat feature there. We want you to download the handout. We want you to make notes yourself. And ultimately, hopefully at the end of the period, you've got a notebook, either physical or metaphorical, but a notebook of a variety of handouts that have a series of to-do items, actionable things, tangible things that you can do from a personal standpoint, as well as from a professional standpoint, in order to help make sure that it doesn't become the zombie apocalypse that Barry talked about in this article. So we're going to take a few minutes, each of us, to kind of talk about these core subjects and kind of our passion. So I'm going to kick it off with reimagining mentorship. I selected it. You'll probably not find a Hallmark card for it, but January happens to be mentorship month. And there's a lot of activity going on with that. If you've seen in the handout, if you downloaded the handout, you've seen my 2 panelist points are: mentorship is about professional and personal and built through relationship. And if you are going to reach your potential, being a lifelong learner means you are both a mentor and a protege or mentee. So as I was thinking back through it, I've had many mentors in my life. Now, a lot of them didn't really necessarily have that official title. And I'm definitely going to leave some out, but I think it'd be interesting, or at least to me anyway, maybe not to you, to kind of go to memory lane and think about all the people that have impacted me. Obviously, my parents, you can't choose your parents, but I chose wisely, or they chose wisely, because they instilled a lot of who I am, obviously, in my upbringing. My uncle had a great relationship with him. And he not only had a personal relationship with me, but he was an entrepreneur by nature, and he kind of buried that seed in me of trying to be, the best I could be from a business standpoint. I started work at age 13 at a restaurant called Pizza Pan, and the owner of that was a really difficult, challenging manager, but he really pushed me into thinking about work ethic. And the thing that he taught me from the very beginning is, even if you don't have anything to do, look like you're busy. And so that kind of has instilled itself that I'm constantly going to be looking for stuff to do. My very first professional supervisor at Equifax was a gentleman that's about 15 years older than me. He had been there for a while. But we had lots of chats. I ended up working night shift at times, and there's amazing things that you can do at 3 a.m. To talk about stuff when you're trying to stay awake. And I learned a lot about being a white-collar worker. The original owner of Priam, when I started working for them as a consultant back in 1990 on nights and weekends, and I can remember lots of drives with him and meals that I had with him where he imparted professional feedback in regards to my performance, but also personal input as I was in my early 30s about starting a family and all those different things. And it really kind of gravitated towards that. Helen Patterson, who was a really great mentor to me in helping me understand how to deal with media, how to write properly, how to speak properly. I didn't even know I had the gift of gab until I started talking about it and started using it. And Helen Patterson really helped me figure out how to be a professional when it comes to that. And Stuart Colburn, a guy that I really consider a brother, and really is the reason for RX Professor, in that I saw an attorney get up and speak very passionately about the opioid epidemic. And I went up and introduced myself to him afterwards, thinking that he's this rock star and he wouldn't want to talk to this nobody. And he was very gracious and very professional. And since that time, we've had lots of opportunities to chat about life in general and about profession. But I've also had a lot of mentees or proteges in my life. Some of them were purposeful and some of it was just pure happenstance. In actuality, I probably learned as much about myself in those conversations as whatever wisdom I may have given them. There really is a reason why I chose as my tagline, educator and agitator, because I really do believe that that is who I am. So I've worked with youth and young adults pretty much my entire adult life. I've had numerous conversations with people in work comp over the years, in cars during rush hour, at conferences, over meals, even over Zoom over the past year. And so, by virtue of that, I think the common theme for everything that I've been thinking back through was investment by others into me and by me into others. And it was really quality and quantity time, because I think both are important. Both quality and quantity time are important for trusting relationship. And most of the conversations I had went well beyond technical skills. So if you think of mentorship and reimagining mentorship, it's not necessarily helping them be the best employee, it's helping them be the best human being. And I think that's the mentorship that really has a final and lasting personal connection. And the conversations were oftentimes deep, not necessarily shallow, and it really gave me and them a full 3D picture in that. I don't know everything, and I never will, and I don't think anybody ever will either. So I need to constantly be intellectually stimulated, and I constantly need to learn new things. So even though I'm old, I'm not retiring to just be a mentor. I also want to continue to be mentored and to find people that will continue to push me. So all that being said, that's why I'm really excited about W3, our webinar on February 18th, which is going to be specifically about mentorship. And I've got a great group of co-panelists that are going to join me whose passions really align with my vision of mentorship. But just as importantly, and this is hopefully y'all are going to catch on to this, we're going to launch a mentor protege connection program that's affiliated with the transitions, where we accrue a database of mentors and mentees/proteges, and we're going to establish industry links for people to find each other that historically may not have found each other, that don't go to conferences or don't have built-in mentorship programs in their company. So I'm really, really excited about launching something tangible to make mentorship something that WorkComp really takes seriously, not just within a company, but as the industry as a whole. So if you're interested in being a mentor or a mentee or a protege, let me know, because we're going to be starting very soon. In fact, our second advisory council meeting on the mentoring team is going to meet tomorrow. And we're continuing. We've got committees. We're working towards a lot of great things that we're going to be put together. And I'm really, really excited about that, and hope that you'll join us in the mentoring program, as well as W3 on February 18th. So with that, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to talk about her segment on changing your organization's talent.
Okay, so I'll be going actually next week, next Tuesday, so W2. And so you can see just through the list here, the sessions are all about, reimagining various business practices within our industry. But we thought, before we start reimagining workers' comp and our culture, we thought it would be, a good idea to first stop, to collaborate and listen. And yes, I did just quote Vanilla Ice. That's one of my points. Thank you. Go Gen X. But seriously, we thought let's first take a pause. We want to look at the study data. We want to take stock of, where we've been, how we're currently positioned to address the industry's talent crisis, so we really know what the jumping off point is. And that leads me to my next quote, which is not a rapper. It's Peter Drucker, and he said, you can't improve what you don't measure. And I will be honest with you all, the study findings over the years have, it's been a bit mixed bag related to our talent practices. It's been some good, it's been some bad, and it's been some ugly. So, the good, we will be going over that. There's definitely areas where we've improved, where we're trending in the right direction. But we'll also take a hard look at some of that bad and the ugly, if you will. It's not going to be about wagging our fingers at those items in this webinar. We want to thank our survey participants who've been, courageous and willing to share some of those warts with us, so that we understand where the problem areas are in the industry. Because it's really only by knowing, where we truly are, can we know where we need to focus. So that's what next week's webinar is about. And, I'll share a little bit more later how we're structuring that, but it will be fun. It will be informative, and I hope that everyone can join.
Thanks, Rachel. Marcus, management style.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I'll be going the week of March 8th, and as you can see from the slide, I'll be focusing on reimagining management style. And I think, the big takeaways here that we'll talk through are a couple-fold, right? How do you look outside of our industry? I think that's a very important theme that we have to focus on. Sometimes I think we can tend to be very insular and recruiting from within, and folks are just changing jobs. So how do we draw talent in and also retain that talent such that it doesn't leave? And then I think secondarily, just one of the points that we'll hit on as well is the management of this new wave and this next generation of folks that are coming into the business. And I think I hit on it the last time we had the webinar, but You know, there are some new sheriffs and deputies in town, and the next wave, you know, they don't just come to work for a paycheck. They come to work because of that company's core values, their mission, how they respond to certain political things, right? So we are being challenged as leaders to react in ways that maybe we've been uncomfortable with in the past. And so we'll explore some of that. We'll explore some different management styles and actual techniques. A lot of them I stole from our head of HR, who's a fantastic person, Amanda Gilbert. So I'll just credit her with a lot of the footnotes, but sharing those best practices. And I think the last thing that I'm really looking forward to about the segment I'll have is that while there will be some folks from our industry who run large teams and who are looking, I think we'll get some great takeaways from. I'm also going to have a special outside guest, right? Because I think while we have a lot of us, it's great to get perspectives from folks who are not here. What are people doing in other industries? We aren't the first people to have some of these things we're trying to overcome or get better at. And so those are going to be some of the takeaways. I'm excited about sharing some best practices, not only from my own career and company, but also to bring in some of those best practices on management from others as well.
Thanks, Marcus. And one of the points that you made in the original webinar was talking about the ladder versus the lattice. And I'm guessing, you know, that Claire's nodding her head. She remembers that. I'm guessing that you're going to cover that concept in your webinar as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one, again, I'm going to give credit to our HR team, which is fantastic. But, you know, we as a company have probably had to face some of the mixing of generations more than others. I shared last time the average age of the company was 39, and that 60% of our workforce were millennials and 10% baby boomers, which I think when Claire and Rachel gave their numbers, it was like flip-flopped for the rest of the industry. So maybe by chance, by luck, we've had to beat our head against the walls and figure some of this stuff out earlier. And one of the things that our team quickly noticed was, you know, everyone hears the saying that, you know, we blame millennials. I'm a millennial, by the way, too, on the further end of the spectrum, but that, you know, millennials are always want to get jobs, get promoted. And we recognize that, you know, that was true. But there's nothing we're going to do about it, right? We can't stop that if that's what it is. And so how can we actually provide a system to do it? And so our team really focuses on this concept of, you know, there's not a one-way ladder that you become a manager, then a director, then a VP, then SVP, but there's a lattice. So you can move sideways. You can go into different departments at our company. You can find ways to transition if you were in customer service into sales. You can find ways to move across the company to give people opportunity. So yeah, that's one idea, Mark, and just some good takeaways I think we'll hopefully share that hopefully can help people as we all try to navigate what's here and what's coming.
Great, thanks, Marcus. Claire, communication models.
Sweet. All right. So I tend to be very glitter and sparkles. And when we look at the communication models, a lot of the takeaways that I want to really focus surrounding how we communicate in the workers' compensation space stem a lot from an emotional intelligence standpoint. So in the workers' compensation industry, on my LinkedIn profile, and one of the pictures that I usually love to show when I'm speaking is the gentlemen that are on the beam from New York City that happen to all be immigrants. Fun fact for that picture, but it's very gray and dreary. And, you know, when people get into this space, they've always heard about how terrible the system is. They get to see all of the ads coming from attorneys about, you know, the insurance companies out to get you or know your rights. And it's that we are just these terrible, awful human beings. And that is the communication that goes out into the industry on a regular basis and to people who are external. So when they do come into our space, they have this terrible picture of us. And so I want the industry to be thought of as glitter and sparkles and the very big advocacy approach. You know, we are the workers recovery unit because we're here to make good things happen for injured workers. And I know Bob Wilson has talked a lot on workerscompensation.com on his philosophy surrounding workers recovery too. And I think it goes a lot deeper when we're looking at communication models, because when we look at the talent gap, and Rachel's benchmarking study actually showed this, when we look at what frontline adjusters think of the advocacy model, there was almost 3/4 that did not understand what that meant. And so when I read that, and I'm doing my own research looking at what it engages people in the insurance industry and how do we effectively recruit, attract, retain, how do we develop people, it really stems a lot from how are we communicating. And I think the old school way of looking at things was that we treated workers' compensation, and very respectfully to all of my property friends, we treat them like property claims, like, oh, you've injured your shoulder. Well, your shoulder is worth X. we don't think about it as a whole person or a lifestyle change or the family that's involved, the team member that's no longer there, the church member that's no longer able to volunteer. We don't look at it from a holistic standpoint. We look at it as a body part has been injured, we need to fix the body part. I want to challenge the industry to look at the entire person. And when we talk about psychosocial issues, social determinants of health, we're going way beyond the scope of comorbidities and fixing a body part. We are really looking at taking that holistic approach of getting somebody back to their life, and the back to work comes along with that when we're focusing on that. When we also look at that from someone who is an outsider looking in to come into the industry, it's a lot more appealing to be a game changer who can have the impact of changing somebody's life every single day that they come to work. And that's when I love talking to adjusters, because I get a lot of the feedback I'll get is, but I'm just an adjuster. You are also the single most important person that an injured worker is going to work with during this time. And I think there's a lot of educational value that we can start looking at when we start focusing on the right components, instead of having the old checkbox mentality of, did I do my 24-hour contacts? Did I ask all these questions? We start looking at things differently. Let's use motivational interviewing when we're starting to ask these questions. Yes, there's a lot of state parameters. There's a lot of state jurisdictional knowledge that we need to be able to communicate, but it has to be done in a consumable fashion. And think about if you have an auto accident or something like that, and you have to call in to report your claim. I like to talk to a human being, my personal opinion, and I don't think when you have an injured body part and you are now going to be out of your work environment, that you want to have like these just this very mundane like checklist mentality where you're looking to call and dial 3 and then, oh, wait, hold on, press 7 to get connected to. We need that human approach to how we handle things, because we're not just working with an injured worker, we're working with a parent, a spouse, a family member that might be taking care of other family members. We're removing somebody from a work environment. And even more so, we've all just been through this pandemic and are still going through it. You know how awful it feels to be isolated? It showcases the massive importance for human connection, and not even just the human connection component, but to do it correctly. Injured workers need to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And it is up to all of us that are in this space to effectively drive that change through communication models, not only from our stance of administering the claims, but any type of vendor partnerships, helping people understand the statutes that are in existence, helping employers all across the nation to understand that if you are a leader, you should care about workers' compensation, because as a leader of people, if anyone on your team would ever get injured, you are the single most important person that contacts that injured worker within that next 24-hour period. And a lot of employers don't know that, they don't see that, they don't think about it from that kind of standpoint. But so there's a lot of things when we look at reimagining communication models. How do we talk about the system in general? How do we train our adjusters? I think that we need to do a much better job of training everyone from an emotional intelligence standpoint, making sure that we are utilizing empathy, and that we look at different avenues, such as like motivational interviewing versus an interrogation. And so when we are going to, I am week 6 on April 19th, and when we are going to talk, we're going to really take a look at some of the industry and what we have done to actually showcase this, and how we've been able to effectively implement change, and hear from people that are doing it, and the vision for the future of how we continue to communicate. When we also do this, it's important to remember that if we see the industry as this black, white, and gray model, the youngers aren't going to want to come into this because it doesn't look fun, it doesn't look invigorating, it doesn't look like something that they want to do. What my research showed was that everybody wants meaning and purpose. And so the more that we can drive meaning and purpose through every position that exists, and how much impact and influence you can have to a game change and make people's lives better, that's what everyone wants to really participate in, is something that's bigger than themselves and a greater whole overall.
Great, thanks, Claire. I think to distill that is probably rebranding workers' compensation to be, not only good for the injured workers, but also compelling for people to join it. So hopefully you'll tune in to Claire. I don't know all the panelists that she's got. She'll probably have 27 people on there, but I'm sure it will be fabulous, filled with glitter. Barry, re-examining business processes.
So before I get into the actual business process thing, I want to share by the way, my tongue's bleeding. I don't know if you could tell. I wanted to say something when Rachel was talking, when Marcus, et cetera, with you for mentorship. One thing I just kind of want to remind everybody that the focus of transitions picked that name because that's literally the process that we're in right now in our industry, in a macro as well as a micro basis. So when Rachel talks about the rising longitudinal study that that has been going on for, I can't believe it's already since 2013. It's crazy. But that process is a great example of why we do studies, why we do benchmarking, because out of that, I don't think anybody really thought that when that started that this would maybe be one of the giant focus, but it actually is. And without that data, I will tell you, as the baby boomer of the group, although Mark, I think you are, I'm not leaving you out, bro. You got to come with me. We've seen a lot of things that kind of come and go. They're seasonal, they're issues that people would want to do. For instance, we've been talking about the claim advocacy process for decades. You know, what Claire described is exactly, you know, kind of how we have been doing it for all this time. And you know, I don't want to cast any aspersions, and I won't, but I will tell you that we've had the opportunity to change and deal with that claim advocacy program process for a very long time. Well, what's the difference now as opposed to before? And the rising benchmarking study, where we actually get data, where we're looking at and surveying how people look at the industry and how they interact with it. With Marcus's comments about a ladder versus the lattice. I mean, it's awesome that he has been able to do that, but with all due respect, Amitros is a relatively new company. It's not something that's been around like some of these giant insurance companies, these giant TPAs. That's not to say that what they did and what we should do is anything different than what he's going to say. It's just easier to do it with a younger, smaller company than a giant carrier or a giant brokerage or a giant third-party administrator. So to emphasize, please participate in the rising benchmarking study. It's very, very important. I think the essence of what I want to talk about is, well, one last thing. When we talked about transitions, we said, how are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do? And at the end of the day, we can have, like Marcus said, we can say a lot of smart stuff and we can put on a webinar, but you know, you leave the webinar and then you go back to your normal thing. What we wanted to do was we wanted to give tangible, actionable processes that will include the changing of our companies. And to do that, you have to create a plan. So if you take all of these multi-dimensional issues, communication, technology, management, marketing, HR, mentorship, at the end of the day, it can get very unwieldy. And what we want to do is, and what you will get out of every one of these webinars, is an actual roadmap for that particular subject matter, which when you put it together, it can be by itself, but when you put it together, really does create an incredibly valuable plan to help you, to give you a path towards the kind of changes that we're discussing. And it's very difficult to change business processes when you are a legacy business, whether you have legacy technology, Drew's going to talk about that, whether you have legacy management, Marcus is going to talk about that, when you have folks that are not really willing to pass the torch and mentor and educate. Those business processes must change. And just to give a couple of examples, in the claims world, a lot of what we do is based on our work volume. We have, if a claims examiner, for instance, has 225 cases, there's no way they are going to be able to do the kind of work that we're talking about relative to what Claire has described, what's in the study the benchmarking study about claim advocacy. You can't, if you're just checking off the box because you've got a stack of files that have to get out in the next couple of hours, it's different than if you have a meaningful exchange with an injured worker. How our technology drives the process. A great example also of the kind of re-engineering, if you will, is I'd like to give a plug for an organization that I feel very strongly about, and I'm a member. And in fact, I'm wearing the pin today, Kids Chance. Kids Chance is an amazing example of kind of evolving into doing something that is so impactful and so right. No one really disagrees with its mandate and with it, what it's trying to achieve. But at the end of the day, no one had done it. And Kids Chance identified an issue, i.e. injured workers, kids being left to deal on their own with the unfortunate demise of an injured worker, and not only reaching out to them and not only doing the fundraising, but having developed a database for injured worker kids that are not old enough. So how do you do that? What do you do? Somebody unfortunately passes away and they have a 5-year-old kid. Well, that kid isn't going to really be able to get anything from Kids Chance unless we reach out to them when they're 17 to remind them that they have the opportunity to be part of that benefit. That is a completely reimagined process. And we need to do that kind of thing in the other aspects of our industries. And I know everybody, or not everybody, some folks might say, be in denial, if you will, about just how, why do I really have to spend all this money and go through all this hassle, spend all this time and change my process? Well, the reality is I use the analogy of the Titanic. You remember the Titanic movie? There were folks who just did not believe that the ship was going down, and they were having the violinists play to them while everybody's flipping out and trying to get, to a boat off of the ship. We do have that head in the sand kind of approach sometimes, and it's very important that we address and embrace change as it relates to this talent crisis that, as Rachel aptly said, is not looming. We're here. We're in it. So my group will talk about a lot of the different business processes that are very important that we take a look at and that we really understand. Because at the end of the day, everybody has already talked about who will and who won't want to come work in our industry. And our next generations, they work for money. They feel like they're entitled to a good job, but they also feel like they can pick and choose when and where they want to work. And if they don't want to work in an industry that is considered the keeper of the money and doesn't really want to provide any altruistic benefit, doesn't want to do good for society, doesn't want to make them feel good with old technology and workloads that are too high, it's not going to happen. It's just very important that we address that.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Drew, technology strategies.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Barry, I think that's a great lead into what I'm going to talk about. So I chose technology, I think, for a few different reasons. I mentioned my title. Two of the words in my title are analytics and data. And I think, obviously, when I think of those, I think technology obviously goes hand in hand with that. So, it's kind of my comfort zone. But I think, as we think about technology strategies and how we can reimagine that, I think it's critical to understand that, for me, I'm passionate that analytics has to be at the core of making the best decisions we possibly can. Doesn't matter what type of role you're in the industry, whether it's as an employer, TPA, managed care, whatever it might be. I think that's critical. And I think, at the same time, I think, as we look at analytics, we come to understand, like the claims advocacy model, that the best outcomes, both financially and for our employees at United, are they're not mutually exclusive. We can do the right thing financially and still help the person get better and get back to work and get back to their life. And so I think that's important. And I think, again, as we talk about data, I think, that's really important, I think. And I always say clean data because I think there's a lot of dirty data or bad data out there. And I fall into this trap where I have a tendency to look at data and try to frame it to meet my preconceived notions. So I think that's something that we'll look at as well. Another reason I looked at this, I've seen a comment on LinkedIn and some other social media sites, and it goes something like this. It says, it's a multiple choice question. Who's led the digital transformation at your company? And it's 3 options: A, your CEO, B, your chief technology officer, or C, COVID-19. And I think that's half joking, but I really think it's relevant because we're kind of in this evolutionary phase right now where everyone's already adapting to new technology and doing it so quickly. So I think it's a unique opportunity for us to kind of lean into what's already ongoing out there in every industry, but obviously workers' compensation as well, and kind of be early adopters in how we look at those kinds of things. I think I think it's also critical to look at, the fact that technology doesn't just help, newer, inexperienced workers. I think it can help everyone do their jobs better, and it can help everyone be more efficient. I think that's important. And then lastly, it's obviously going to attract younger generations as well. As people come into the workforce, they want to work for forward-thinking companies who have exciting tools, exciting technology. So I think that's going to be critical to kind of attracting and retaining talent. So all things that we'll dive into. I don't go for quite a while. We'll be later on this year, but I'm excited to do the panel.
Yeah, there may be another edition or version or 2 of stuff between now and the time that you do your presentation. So don't create your PowerPoint right now. Just things change quickly. Melissa, reimagining marketing methods.
Yeah, so I think I'm a little further on in the year as well. But working in marketing and being a millennial, especially being a millennial consumer, I'm very aware of how different our marketing practices are in our industry compared to other industries. Millennials are already in our industry, so they're like age 27 to 41. And now we even need to be thinking about Gen Z. Right now, they're like 9 to 26 years old. They're high school, college students. And these are the generations that are going to start to integrate themselves into our industry. They'll soon be the injured workers. They'll be the decision makers at the companies that we want to tailor our marketing for. So marketing to them is very different than what we're used to, the traditional media. I'm not sure that a Gen Z person even might know what a press release is. So I think that there's a lot of different tactics, when it comes to marketing towards them. And I think it is so important because they will be the people soon, probably within the next 10 years, that we need to be marketing to. And it'll require big shifts in our strategies. So it's not just marketing our own companies or services, but to kind of Claire's point, like rebranding our industry as a whole too. Like, how do we market wanting to be part of this space? And I think that's kind of a collective effort from everybody in all of our different organizations. But it's something that we definitely need to be paying attention to so that they want to join it. And then I think lastly, to Drew's point, this involves marketing, to them through a lot of new technologies. So social media is obviously one of them, but it's no longer Facebook. It's not just LinkedIn. It's Instagram and it's TikTok and it's all of these different ones that maybe we don't know as much about. But that's where these generations live. So I think if we're thinking about marketing to them as, again, injured workers, decision makers, our next generation of consumers, we really need to kind of meet them where they are in all of that technology and all of those different social media platforms. And I think it's really going to go with the reimagine theme, reimagining all of our marketing strategies that we've kind of known and kind of embracing that new technology and some new tactics.
Great, thanks. Go ahead.
I too, Mark, wanted to just chime in on Melissa's point because she hit on something I think is important where I've even seen, I know at the company where Melissa may even interact with HR. Like they work together because the company needs to be presented in a certain way, very thoughtfully, so that we attract people. So I don't know if I'm speaking out loud, but they might have like a monthly meeting where they just talk about like, how do we market the company to human capital, to people? And our marketing person is involved with like hand in hand with the HR person on recruiting as a point of emphasis.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot that kind of goes into that too, making sure that our employer brand, our visibility in that way. As Marcus mentioned, like we'll collaborate on awards that we can apply for to improve our standing as an employer. Just the way that we even present ourselves online for business reasons affects the way that people might look us up when they're looking at a job at our company. So making sure that all of that is working, together to put our best foot forward.
Great. Well, what we did is we came up with some starter questions as you contemplate creating your plan in regards to things that you need to be thinking about. What roles or knowledge is at risk? What are you doing to recruit and retain? How are you inviting new voices to participate? What part of the culture needs to be reviewed? What policies need to be reviewed? What does your boss need to do differently? What do you need to do differently? What does your company need to reimagine? What do you need to reimagine? Any additional questions, panel, that you'd like to add to just kind of see the audience's thoughts in regards to what they need to be contemplating as we go on this journey in 2021?
I think one of the important things to think about is when we look at all these questions that we have asked, I think a lot of it also starts from you as the individual. So whoever is sitting on the other side of our webinar with us, it all starts with you. Like, what kind of change can you effectively make or look at differently or really bring awareness to from your seat, no matter who you are or what level that you're sitting in the company? Because I think a lot of the times we want to see things come top down, but we've noticed that thanks to the benchmarking study, there is the vacuum. And there is not all the information that is not coming down through every level. So I would encourage everybody that's here, that's listening, that's taking part of this, to look in the mirror and figure out where you sit and what kind of scope and influence you have to drive this change and help us with this transition.
Yeah, Claire, that's
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Barry. That I had is like, what are you actively doing today? And are you actually having frank conversations about the talent shift within your organization? Because all of these questions are great, but if you're not going to talk about them and actually, act on them, that's the first step. So.
I was just going to add, I think many of these questions could fall under this, but just to cull it out because it's so specific and it's so impactful, is maybe understand what has the pandemic done to me, as Claire said, as a worker, as somebody who's in the business, and what has it done to the process? As an example, we know that a lot of companies are purely digital and are using everything in a paperless environment. But we also know that there are other companies that say they're paperless, but they really aren't. And they might be paperless for one particular aspect, but they're not truly paperless. So in a pandemic, post-pandemic environment where we're not necessarily everybody's coming to the office. Claire talked about the other day how excited she was to actually get to go to the office because, we're all kind of pent up in our own environments. This is a great example of that, of where the technology that Drew's going to talk about, because if you can't do your job in a purely digital paperless environment, you have to go to the office. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Silicon Valley is infamous or famous for having these giant campuses where everybody comes in, and their entire purpose and existence is to keep people at the campus. So they get all these amazing benefits and all these things that they can do in their daily routine, but they don't have to leave. Well, guess what? Those offices are empty. You could throw a bowling ball through those offices. So how do you do that? How do you reimagine what that's going to look like in a post-pandemic environment?
Yeah, we've got a great question from the audience, and to throw it out there for the panel. How do you best incorporate the employees that plan to retire into this process? I think that's a very great, insightful question. Claire, it looks like you got.
I'll take that because my leadership team within the Workers Recovery Unit has over 100 years of experience. So this is an actual thing that I'm dealing with right now. Pull up some chairs and include them in the dialogue and the conversations. What are we looking at? What are we looking at from a succession planning standpoint? There's a lot of this, that's a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that won't be able to be replicated. So who are you mentoring? Who do you see as your next successors? How do we bring this to fruition? And really bringing them to the table and asking for their input, and then making sure that that's the thought process throughout their minds. Just pull up a chair.
Yeah.
Bring them.
Include them. Don't pretend like they're not there.
The other point, Mark, is, and we've talked about this, that it's absolutely vital. If any of these plans are going to work, senior management, specifically the C-suite, must be engaged. We can be going through rat holes that are absolutely vital, but if senior management isn't going to hear that, do that, be that, it's going to be very, very, well, it'll be an exercise that is more intellectual than impactful.
And Rachel, you saw that in the Rising study, that there was a disparity between what the leadership thought was going on versus the frontline workers, which you just did the very first study of frontline workers last year. Can you kind of speak to maybe how you bring the ones that are retiring and get them that seat at the table, as Claire was mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that study was very important. You know, even members of our advisory council who are very passionate about, you know, this new mission, or, you know, advocacy, as we're talking about, realizing that that message just isn't getting down. You know, maybe they're not repeating it enough, there's not enough training. And so I think it was really eye-opening to a lot of people. I think the data that we have seen on knowledge transfer and succession planning, there is work to do there. So, you know, I think that this question by the audience member, or the suggestion, one of those other questions organizations should be asking themselves is, how do we institutionalize this knowledge? How do we transfer this knowledge? Because it is definitely a challenge for the industry right now.
I think the other factor on this is be vulnerable. I mean, I would say be vulnerable and acknowledge that you don't know what to do. I can tell you that I did that. I went to my leadership team and I was like, I do not know how to put 100 years of knowledge into PowerPoints and, you know, different methods of training that aren't going to be consumable or effective, because you guys have lived through experiences that I have not. You guys have done, you have tried, and we've had trial and error multiple times. I don't know that, and I don't know how we can effectively get better, but I also have no problem going to them and saying, I need your help. We need to sit down, we need to talk, we need to make a game plan, we need to figure out how to make the information consumable so that we do not repeat history and we do not keep repeating the same mistakes. And I think that there is an issue at the C-suite for ever wanting to be vulnerable, number one, and two, to listen.
Yeah, and maybe the best thing to do is get Drew to figure out how to plug a USB port into retiring and just kind of download into artificial intelligence.
I would like to see that between Drew and Barry.
Yeah. There's another comment here. Most companies have no, or maybe that's is that a comment back from us? The history and knowledge lies with much of the baby boomers, and most will be gone in 10 years. Who are they mentoring? If management is even looking at this, or are they working with them? So I think that comment kind of feeds a lot with what we're talking about. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. Again, really the focus, hopefully what you've gotten from this, is our goal is to help you create a plan. And each webinar, again, will have a handout. Hopefully you found the handout that we provided here to be helpful. Creating a plan, not only for just your company, but also for yourself. Solicit additional support, identify the stakeholders and decision makers, execute the plan, then evaluate the plan, then edit the plan, then execute the plan, then evaluate the plan, then edit the plan. To Claire's point, we don't know what we don't know. And we probably don't know more than we know at this juncture in regards to how to effectively do this. With that, I want to let Rachel talk about her session that's coming up next Tuesday, real briefly before we finish up.
Sure. So as I talked about before, our next webinar is really looking at the study data, and, you know, so it can help us understand how we need to pivot as an industry as we respond to this talent crisis, you know, this opportunity, this transformation really with the sense of urgency that it is demanding of us right now. So we've got an amazing panel of work comp vets that you can see there, and they have agreed to be in the hot seat. So they are going to be handing out grades A through F for various talent practices in the industry. And they're not just going to be doling out grades, they're going to be offering solutions as well. They're going to be offering 60-second solutions to be specific. So it's going to be fast paced. There might be a gong, we'll see, but I guess get ready for the fire hose. We're really excited to have you. As one of our panelists has said, please come and plagiarize our ideas. We want to help, so if you haven't signed up for that, please do.
Thanks, Rachel. It's going to be really, really important, I think, as we've laid the foundation to kind of continue to attend. That, again, is next Tuesday, January 26th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we've given you the link for the registration if you haven't registered to this point. We really do appreciate everybody that attended. When you throw a party, you hope people show up, and we're really excited that people actually did show up. Hopefully what you got from this is a commitment from the 7 of us. Did I count right? 2, 4, 6. Yeah. That we want to help lead the industry to figure out how to effectively transition during this generational shift. We look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn, on our YouTube channel, and the webinar next Tuesday again. Thank you so much for attending, and we will see you next week.